Most food goes bad in months. The Amish? They've got jars that have lasted a century, still perfect. When power grids fail and grocery shelves go bare, survival won't belong to those with the biggest budgets. It'll belong to those with the oldest wisdom. The Amish never relied on refrigeration, yet they've thrived through wars, depressions, and every modern crisis that emptied supermarkets. In this video, we'll reveal 7 Amish foods that never expire, and 2 that can ruin an entire cellar if you store them wrong. We'll unpack the chemistry, the storage secrets, and the timeless logic that turns ordinary food into permanent security. Let's begin with the first. A golden syrup so pure, bacteria can't even live in it. Number 7. Maple syrup. Martha Yoder pours golden syrup over her grandson's morning pancakes from the same mason jar her grandmother sealed in 1947. The syrup flows smooth, untouched by time, sweet as the day it left the kettle. In her root cellar, 20 more jars wait in the darkness, some marked with dates from decades past, all still perfect. This is the Amish way, pure maple syrup that defies every calendar. The mechanism here is simple chemistry. Pure maple syrup contains over 66% sugar, a concentration so high that bacteria can't survive. No microorganism can extract the water it needs to multiply when sugar molecules crowd every available space. The Amish learned this truth through careful observation. Properly boiled syrup, sealed while hot, creates a sterile environment that remains stable for generations. But here's what separates Amish syrup from the commercial bottles crowding supermarket shelves. Industrial producers add corn syrup, preservatives, and artificial maple flavoring to stretch their product. These additives actually shorten shelf life because they introduce moisture and compounds that eventually break down. The Amish tap their own sugar maples, boil the sap in outdoor kettles over wood fires, and seal nothing but pure, concentrated sweetness. They store it in thick glass jars in cool, dark cellars where temperature stays constant year-round. No light, no heat fluctuation, just the patient darkness that preserves everything it touches. One family in Lancaster County opened a jar from 1923 during the pandemic. The syrup tasted as rich as fresh-tapped spring sap. And here's where it gets better. While your family debates whether month-old milk is still safe, the Amish know their syrup will outlive their grandchildren's grandchildren. Because when you remove every variable that causes decay, what remains is essentially immortal. But syrup is just sweetness. The next on our list is the foundation of Amish survival, the one food they grind fresh every single morning. Number 6. Wheat berries. Jacob Miller reaches into a barrel his great-grandfather filled in 1903. His hands close around hard kernels of wheat, each one still viable, still ready to become bread. Tomorrow morning, he'll grind a cup of these ancient grains in his hand-crank mill, and the flour will smell like harvest day. Wheat berries don't just last, they wait. The preservation mechanism works through cellular dormancy. Each wheat berry is a living seed protected by multiple layers. The outer bran, the endosperm, and the germ tucked safely inside. When stored in cool, dry conditions with minimal oxygen, these kernels essentially hibernate. Their metabolic process is slow to nearly zero. Enzymes that would normally trigger sprouting remain inactive. Life pauses, preserved in a form that can restart with just water and soil. The Amish store wheat berries in food-grade buckets with oxygen absorbers. Small packets that remove the air that would otherwise trigger deterioration. Without oxygen, the oils in the germ can't oxidize. Without moisture, no mold can take root. The berries sit in sealed darkness for 30 years or more, waiting for the mill. This is knowledge that saved communities during the Great Depression. Families who'd stockpiled wheat berries had fresh bread when their neighbors had nothing. A 50-pound bucket stored properly feeds a family of 4 for 3 months. Ground fresh each morning, the flour retains nutrients that vanish from store-bought bags within weeks of milling. And here's the part that changes everything. While commercial flour goes rancid in your pantry after 6 months, whole wheat berries stay viable for decades. The Amish aren't just storing calories. They're storing the possibility of bread, of sustenance, of life itself. But grain alone won't carry you through winter. If this kind of old-school survival knowledge fires you up, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the next one. Number 5. Dried beans. Sarah Stoltzfus counts her jars in the cellar. Red kidney, black turtle, navy white, each variety representing a different year's harvest. Some jars date back to when her children were small. They're grown now with families of their own. The beans remain hard as river stones, waiting for water to bring them back to life. 40 years in storage, and every single bean will soften in tomorrow's soup. The mechanism is dehydration to a critical threshold. Fresh beans contain about 60 to 70% moisture. The Amish dry them down to 10% or below, a level where enzymatic activity ceases and microorganisms cannot function. At this moisture content, beans enter a state of suspended animation. All the protein, all the fiber, all the minerals remain locked inside the seed coat, protected from time. They store dried beans in glass jars with tight-fitting lids, sometimes adding a small cloth bag of rice to absorb any residual moisture. The jars line cellar shelves where temperature never exceeds 65 degrees and humidity stays below 50%. No light penetrates the thick glass, no air circulates to introduce moisture. The beans wait in conditions that halt biological time. Here's what the Amish understand that most preppers miss. Beans and rice together form a complete protein. The amino acids missing in rice appear in beans. What beans lack, rice provides. A pantry stocked with both becomes a nutrition fortress that can sustain life indefinitely. During the pandemic supply chain breakdowns, Amish families never worry. Their cellars held enough beans to feed their communities for years. And the beauty of this system, while your canned goods rust and bulge with botulism, dried beans just get harder. Soak them longer, cook them slower, they'll still feed you. But protein and grain need a preservative to make them last. Number 4. Salt. Eli Beachy reaches into the wooden barrel that stood in his cellar corner since before the Civil War. The salt inside flows like white sand. Still pure, still powerful enough to cure an entire hog. His grandfather's grandfather filled this barrel, and the salt hasn't aged a single day. Some things don't decay because they're already elemental, already reduced to their most basic, indestructible form. The preservation mechanism is ionic perfection. Salt is sodium chloride, a mineral compound so stable that it cannot spoil. There are no organic molecules to break down, no cells to die, no proteins to denature. It exists in a state of chemical completion. The Amish use this eternal quality to preserve everything else: meat, vegetables, butter, even eggs. Salt draws moisture from food through osmosis, creating an environment where bacteria dehydrate and die. They stockpile salt in multiple forms: coarse curing salt for meat, fine table salt for daily cooking, pickling salt without additives for preserving vegetables. Each type serves a specific purpose, but all share the same infinite shelf life. As long as salt stays dry, it stays perfect. The Amish store it in wooden barrels lined with cloth, and crocks with tight lids, and mason jars sealed against humidity. During the winter butchering season, salt becomes the difference between feast and famine. A 300-pound hog transformed into hams, bacon, and sausage, all cured in salt, all preserved for the year ahead. The salt penetrates the muscle tissue, replacing moisture with minerals, creating meat that lasts through summer heat without refrigeration. And here's the truth that redefines preparedness. While your refrigerator holds food for days, salt preserves it for decades. One barrel of salt can save 1,000 pounds of meat, but even salt can't match the legend of the next one. This food was found in tombs older than the pyramids. Still edible, still perfect. Number 3. Honey. Anna Lapp lifts a jar from her cellar shelf. The handwritten label reads 1952 in her grandmother's careful script. She unscrews the lid, and the honey inside has crystallized to a thick, golden paste. She sets it in warm water, and within minutes, it flows like liquid amber, just as sweet as the day the bees made it. 70 years old and flawless. This is food that outlives generations. The mechanism is mathematical certainty. Honey contains less than 18% water, too little for any microorganism to survive. Bacteria and mold need moisture to metabolize, to reproduce, to exist. Honey offers them nothing but concentrated sugar molecules and trace minerals. Additionally, bees add an enzyme that produces hydrogen peroxide, a natural antimicrobial compound. The result is a substance so hostile to decay that it's essentially eternal. The Amish harvest honey from their own hives, never adding water, never heating it beyond what the bees intended. They strain it through cloth to remove wax particles, then pour it into thick glass jars and seal them tight. The jars go into root cellars where darkness and cool temperatures prevent crystallization for years. Even when crystals form, the honey remains perfect. Just warm it, and it returns to liquid gold. Archaeologists opened Egyptian tombs sealed for 3,000 years and found honey still edible. The Amish know this history. They've tested it themselves with jars passed down through families. Honey doesn't expire because it's already preserved by nature's most perfect process. They use honey for everything. sweetening tea, treating wounds, soothing coughs, baking bread. A single jar holds 1,000 purposes. A cellar full of honey holds a lifetime of security. But honey is luxury compared to the next one. Number 2. White rice. David King opens a 5-gallon bucket sealed by his father in 1978. The white rice inside flows like snow, each grain intact, dry, ready to boil. Tomorrow this rice will feed his family the same way it fed his father's family 47 years ago. The bucket holds 25 pounds, enough for 6 months of meals, and it hasn't aged a single day. The mechanism is the absence of life. White rice is a processed grain. The bran and germ have been removed, leaving only the starchy endosperm. This stripping removes the oils and enzymes that cause whole grains to spoil. What remains is pure carbohydrate, stable at the molecular level. No oils to oxidize, no proteins to denature, no vitamins to degrade. Just starch molecules arranged in crystalline structures that time cannot touch. The Amish store white rice in food-grade buckets with gamma-sealed lids and oxygen absorbers. The absorbers consume any residual oxygen in the first 48 hours, creating a vacuum that prevents oxidation and insect activity. The buckets sit in cool, dark cellars where temperature stays steady year-round. No light triggers chemical changes, no moisture introduces mold. The rice enters a state of suspended preservation that can last 50 years or more. This is the foundation of Amish food security. Rice pairs with beans for complete protein. It stretches soups and stews. It absorbs flavors while providing bulk and calories. A family can survive indefinitely on rice and legumes. Not comfortably, but alive. The Amish learned this truth through careful observation. Communities with rice stockpiles weathered every crisis. And here's what changes everything. While brown rice spoils in months from rancid oils, white rice waits in sealed darkness for decades. It's not just food, it's insurance against collapse. But even rice bows before the next one. Number 1. Salt-cured lard. Rebecca Fisher descends into her cellar and approaches a ceramic crock older than the Republic itself. She lifts the lid and there, preserved under a thick cap of fat, sits meat her grandmother cured in 1929. The lard seal remains intact, white, odorless, impenetrable. Beneath it, salt-cured pork waits in the darkness, protected by the oldest preservation method known to humankind. This is immortality rendered in fat and salt. The mechanism combines two eternal elements into one perfect system. First, salt draws all moisture from the meat through osmosis, creating a desert where bacteria cannot live. Then, rendered lard, pure pork fat, forms an airtight seal over the salted meat. No oxygen penetrates the fat barrier. No bacteria can survive without both moisture and air. The meat sits in a sterile chamber of salt and fat, completely isolated from the processes of decay. The Amish cure meat in winter when temperatures stay near freezing. They pack it in salt for weeks, then rinse it and submerge it in crocks filled with fresh rendered lard. The fat solidifies into a white cap that locks out the world. The crocks go into root cellars where they'll remain undisturbed for years, sometimes decades. When they need the meat, they simply break through the lard seal, rinse the piece, and soak it overnight to remove excess salt. This method preserved meat for armies crossing continents. It sustained frontier families through winters that killed unprepared settlers. It requires no electricity, no refrigeration, no modern convenience, just knowledge passed through generations and the patience to do it right. During the Great Depression, families with lard-sealed meat survived when their neighbors starved. The technique works because it addresses every cause of spoilage: moisture, oxygen, temperature, and time. Remove these variables and food becomes permanent. But permanence has enemies, and the Amish know exactly which foods to never stockpile, starting with number 1 that destroys more survival plans than any disaster ever could. Number 1. Commercial processed foods. Michael Zook walks past the grocery store's canned food aisle without a glance. His cart holds flour, salt, and dried beans. Nothing in boxes, nothing in cans with ingredient lists he can't pronounce. Back home, his pantry holds no sodium-laden soups, no preservative-filled vegetables, no mystery meat in metal containers. He knows what most preppers learn too late. Commercial processed food isn't preservation, it's slow poisoning. The mechanism is chemical deterioration disguised as convenience. Commercial canned foods contain extreme sodium levels, often 2,000 milligrams per can, an entire day's limit in a single serving. The salt acts as preservative, but it also triggers hypertension, kidney damage, and cardiovascular disease. The Amish watched English neighbors stockpile these foods, foods, then watch them develop health crises that homegrown, home-canned food never cause. But sodium is just the beginning. Processed foods contain preservatives like BPA that leach from can linings into contents. They include artificial colors, flavors, and stabilizers that create long-term inflammation. Most critically, the canning process destroys heat-sensitive vitamins, particularly vitamin C and B vitamins essential for sustained health. A family living exclusively on canned goods would develop scurvy within months despite full bellies. The Amish avoid this trap entirely. They can their own foods using fresh-picked produce, controlling every ingredient. Their canned tomatoes contain tomatoes, salt, and nothing else. Their green beans stay crisp with nutrients intact. Their chicken sits in jars with broth made from bones they know. No mystery chemicals, no corporate shortcuts. Just food preserved the way it was meant to be. And here's the devastating truth. Preppers stockpiling commercial cans are preparing to survive the crisis while destroying their health. The Amish choose differently. They prepare to thrive. But processed food isn't the only trap. The next one ruins more root cellars than floods and power outages combined. Number 2. Fresh tomatoes in root cellars. Samuel Lapp opens his root cellar and immediately smells the problem before he sees it. Spoiled tomatoes. He'd stored them 2 weeks ago, thinking the cool temperature would preserve them. Now they've turned to mush, releasing ethylene gas that's ripening everything around them prematurely. His winter apples show soft spots. His potatoes are sprouting. One mistake with tomatoes has compromised his entire food supply. The mechanism is ethylene production, a natural plant hormone that tomatoes release as they ripen. In the confined space of a root cellar, this invisible gas concentrates and accelerates the ripening of every fruit and vegetable it touches. Tomatoes produce more ethylene than almost any other crop, and cool storage doesn't stop the process. It only slows it while the gas accumulates. The result is cascading spoilage that can destroy months of careful storage in weeks. The Amish learned this lesson generations ago through bitter experience. One family's tomato mistake could cost them their winter food supply, so they developed a strict rule: never store fresh tomatoes underground. Instead, they process tomatoes immediately at harvest. They can them in jars, make them into sauce, dry them into leather. Every tomato gets transformed into a stable form before it can threaten the cellar's ecosystem. Root cellars work through precise environmental control: temperature between 32 and 40 degrees, humidity around 90%, minimal air circulation. Tomatoes disrupt this balance. They need warmer temperatures to stay firm, but warmth triggers faster ripening. They release moisture that raises humidity beyond safe levels. They're fundamentally incompatible with the storage methods that preserve everything else. And here's what separates the Amish from failed preppers. They know the difference between what can be stored and what must be transformed. Fresh tomatoes go into jars. The jars go into cellars. The system works because they respect the rules that nature sets. The Amish have proved one truth: when systems fail, skills survive. And the foods they keep, they don't just feed bodies, they feed generations. So if you're ready to build a stockpile that never expires, subscribe, hit the like button, and comment which of these you already have in your pantry. Because in the next crisis, you won't be starting from scratch, you'll be starting prepared.